My name is Betsy Branch, and I have been part of Portland Revels artistic team since 2005. A team of us are working to create our 2020 Christmas Revels, which we are presenting online this year to protect our chorus, staff, volunteers, and audience. I'm pleased to talk today with two of my fellow co-creators, Bruce Hostetler, Portland Revels Artistic Director, and Gary Lundgren, Director of Joma Films in Ashland, Oregon. Bruce was formerly the director of the Ashland Independent Film Festival, which is very lucky for us at Revels, given the year we are having. He knows Gary through his many film connections. Thank you both for agreeing to talk with me today.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Bruce, I'd like to start with you. I want to know why Gary? What makes Gary stand out to you as the right choice for Revels this year?
Well, you have to back up a little bit and realize that as we started thinking about taking a Revels stage show and making it something that would be on a small screen in our homes, that I realized that although I've worked in film, that is not my skill set. My skill set is working on a stage and working in real time in a real space with an audience. And that's what I've done most of my career as a director. And realizing that to create a stage production on a small screen is not just putting a camera in the audience, that there's a different vocabulary for how you tell that story. And that I needed somebody who had that skill set to work with me to help me tell that story in an effective way on the small screen. So once I decided that I needed a partner to work on this, then it just became a question of who is that partner? Gary and I met in 2007, I believe, working on a film that Gary did called Calvin Marshall. And we've known each other since then. We've worked sort of peripherally on different projects together. And I've watched Gary's films. I've watched the things that Gary makes. And I like the stories that Gary tells. And I like the way that Gary tells stories. And also because Gary and I have worked together, I figured, well, Gary and I know each other. Gary and I have worked together on things before. I think Gary and I can figure this out because we're going to be figuring this out. This is not something that is a pre-existing formula that we're just going to create another version of. We're creating this thing as we go along. But I like Gary, I trust him, I like the stories that he tells, and he's close enough in Ashland that we can collaborate in a way that feels like he's not, on the other side of the country. So I called him up, asked him if he was available, and luckily, COVID's hitting all of us. We're all looking for something exciting and fun to do. He had the time. And so here we are trying to figure out what this project is together.
Lovely. You're right. There's no formula for Revels even when we're on stage. So
No,
trying to
no.
put it onto a small screen is never been done really. And I know that other Revel cities are also trying to figure out how to do it in their own way. Gary, I have a question for you related to that, which is there something about what you've learned about Christmas Revels and the show that we're doing that you find intriguing, or that's really different from anything you've ever worked on?
Yeah, it's intriguing. The whole challenge of it is intriguing. I think uh, you know, we're so conditioned if you walk into a theater to watch a musical, you kind of know what to expect. Uh, and people are so conditioned watching film and television at home. And so they're not necessarily going to warm up to the idea, like Bruce was saying, of sitting in an auditorium or sitting at home and watching sort of a two-dimensional recording of the Revels production. So I think what was intriguing to me was one, working with Bruce. I've known him, he's been a friend, and we haven't really got to think sort of together. Seems like we're always kind of helping each other. He has his projects, I have my projects. So it was fun to come alongside Bruce and help him achieve this, because he's directing the show. I'm just helping make it as cinematic as possible, or be a sounding board to him to make sure that when people tune in, that entertaining, they get to see the music again, they get to see the company again in their living room, but it's also a kind of a cinematic experience.
Lovely. So Bruce, our director, do you have anything that is unusual that you need from Gary that might be interesting for our chorus and audience members to know about? Anything, any little teasers you might be able to give that won't give too much away?
Again, this goes back to the same idea of what Gary was saying, is that how to make it three-dimensional. How to make it so that it's not just sitting in an audience watching something that in a live performance is very three-dimensional, but on a screen becomes flat. How do you break that up? And how do you keep an audience's focus and interest going on a story that is not a specific one linear story, but is multiple lines, multiple things moving at the same time? We have at least two major storylines going. One is Burl, and one is our narrated story that Ithaca will be narrating. Those are our two lines that move through. They're going to intertwine, they're going to cross. But how do you take both of those lines through the entire piece? And how do you use those as branchings to get to all the other things that Revels does? The children's stuff, the choral numbers, the band sets, the other things that Revels brings. How do you branch those off of a linear storyline in a way that makes sense, in a way that's going to pull people through? And I think for me, again, I know how to do that on a stage. I've been directing Revels on a stage this is my 10th year now. But to do that in a video format where the rules of editing and the rules of what makes sense and what we're conditioned to believe is a transition, and it moves us in a way that we follow where we're going, that's what I don't know. And that's what I need Gary for. That's why Gary's going to be the editor of this piece. And when I was first thinking about this, I was thinking, well, I need an editor. I need someone to put this together. And I realized fairly quickly, I need much more than that. I need someone who can help me figure out how to shoot this in a way that it will be able to be edited. So I'm not just shooting this from my own perspective and then throwing it at Gary and saying, oh, here, put this all together and make it look cinematic, or make it tell a story in a cinematic way. But I need Gary from the beginning. So Gary's working on the script with me. Gary's helping us figure out where different pieces are going to fall and how we're going to make those transitions. Because sometimes Revels doesn't require transitions all the time. Sometimes we're allowed to just, then there's some music, because there is. And it's just the way it works. And that we may keep that convention as we move into a more cinematic world. We may try to push it a little more into a world that really makes a logical progressional sense as we move through. Gary and I are still playing around with that. We don't know yet how all that's going to work.
And you all can find out the answer to that when you tune in to our show in December. And we're really excited to see where this goes. This is uncharted territory for us. So I want to say a big thank you to Bruce and Gary. You can look up Gary on jomafilms.com. That's Joma. Is that the right address, Gary? jomafilms.com.
Yeah, jomafilms.com. Yeah.
Excellent. And you can see some of the other work that he's been involved with. And we're really excited to have you part of our artistic team this year. Thank you very much. And I'm sure see you soon at a creation meeting.
Of course.